Nuremberg, November 1945. 24 men sit in the dock. 4 judges, one from each Allied power, are about to hear the case against them. This is the first time in history a leader is personally held accountable for ordering mass murder. Before this day, no such law existed anywhere. What a ruler did inside his own borders had a name in international law: internal affairs. And that name worked like a locked door. So here's the real question. What did the world do instead, for centuries, with leaders who killed on this scale? The answer starts with a king who killed roughly 10 million people and still died peacefully in his own bed, 3 decades before this room even existed. His name was Leopold II, King of the Belgians. The Congo was not a colony to him. It was his personal property. He acquired it in 1885, calling it an act of charity. For over 20 years, he ran it as a private business, built entirely around rubber and ivory. The system was brutal and simple. Villages were given rubber quotas. Soldiers enforced them at gunpoint. Because bullets were expensive, each soldier had to prove he had used every one. So if a shot missed, a hand was cut off instead, sometimes from someone still alive, just to balance the count. Baskets of severed hands became proof of discipline, passed up the chain of command. Historian Adam Hochschild spent years piecing together what Leopold's regime tried to erase. His estimate, now the most widely cited figure, is 10 million dead, half the population of the territory, killed by murder, starvation, and forced labor. And the brutal fact is, there was no failure to punish this, because there was nothing in place that could. No court on earth had power over what a king did with property he owned outright. When Belgium finally took the Congo from him in 1908, that was the entire punishment. Leopold kept his throne and his fortune. He died in December 1909, mourned as a king. Before handing the territory over, he had the Congo's state records burned. Nobody ever put him in a courtroom because at the time, what he had done was legally nobody else's business. At almost the exact same time, a second colonial power reaches the identical conclusion, with no contact between them at all. In January 1904, the Herero people of German Southwest Africa, today's Namibia, rise up against German colonial rule. After years of losing their land and cattle to settlers, Germany sends General Lothar von Trotha to crush them. And after defeating the Herero at the Battle of Waterberg in August, he drives the survivors into the Omaheke Desert and has the wells there poisoned. On October 2nd, 1904, von Trotha issues a written order telling the Herero that every one of them, armed or not, will be shot on sight within German territory. It is later remembered as the Extermination Order. When the Nama people rise up in support months later, they are told the same fate awaits them. Survivors who don't die of thirst in the desert are rounded up into camps, including one on Shark Island, where forced labor, starvation, and disease kill roughly half to 3/4 of those imprisoned. By the time it ends, an estimated 80% of the Herero people and half of the Nama people are dead. A German doctor named Eugen Fischer conducts medical experiments on children born in the camps, concluding that mixed-race children are biologically inferior. Research he later teaches directly to Nazi doctors, one of whom trains Joseph Mengele. No German official is ever tried for any of it. 2 empires, on 2 different continents, arrive at the exact same method within 20 years of each other, without ever comparing notes, because both of them are protected by the same idea. What a government does to people under its own flag is nobody else's business. Before we continue, if you're finding this as unsettling as I did researching it, consider subscribing. There's a lot more of this history still to come. 11 years later, that same shield covers a government destroying its own citizens rather than a colonial subject population. In April 1915, Ottoman authorities in Constantinople arrest more than 200 Armenian community leaders, writers, and doctors in a single night, and most of them are never seen again. That night is the start of a much larger plan. The Ottoman Interior Minister Talat Pasha orders the deportation of the empire's entire Armenian population, close to 1.5 million people, toward the Syrian desert. Men and teenage boys are pulled out of the deportation columns first and killed on the spot. The women, children, and elderly who remain are marched for weeks without food or water, robbed, assaulted, and killed along the road by the soldiers meant to be escorting them. Those who survive the march arrive at camps in the desert, near a town called Deir ez-Zor, where many more die of starvation and disease or are killed outright. Historians estimate that between 600,000 and 1.5 million Armenians die between 1915 and 1918. And once again, the killings happen entirely inside Ottoman territory, against Ottoman citizens, so under the law of the time, no outside court has any right to step in. Britain tries anyway. After the war, British forces detain 144 Ottoman officials and send them to the island of Malta, hoping to build a war crimes case. For 2 years, prosecutors search through Ottoman records, British files, and witness accounts. It falls apart. Some evidence has been destroyed. Some witnesses can't be found. Britain's own top prosecutor rules there isn't enough legally solid proof. In 1921, Turkish nationalists take a group of British hostages and demand the prisoners' release. Britain agrees. The men held at Malta walk free without ever standing trial. 2 years later, a peace treaty is signed, and it says nothing at all about war crimes. This wasn't a trial that failed. It was an attempt to build a courtroom that had nowhere yet to stand. The clearest proof that this shield had nothing to do with how bad the crime was and everything to do with where it happened comes from inside the very alliance that would later judge Germany at Nuremberg. Between 1932 and 1933, Stalin's government pushes through a policy of forced collectivization across Ukraine, and the result is a famine now known as the Holodomor. Villages are sealed off so nobody can leave and search for food elsewhere. Grain is seized down to the last handful, and that same grain is shipped abroad and sold for cash, while people are dying in the fields around empty granaries. A Welsh journalist named Gareth Jones walks through some of these villages in the spring of 1933 and reports what he sees: skeletal children, empty houses, entire communities going quiet. Most Western newspapers ignore him. He is later killed under circumstances many historians believe were arranged by Soviet agents. The most careful modern estimate puts the death toll from the famine at close to 4 million people. A few years later, from 1936 to 1938, Stalin's Great Purge executes roughly 700,000 more people and sends hundreds of thousands into labor camps, eliminating rivals, officers, and ordinary citizens on charges that were often invented. Both catastrophes happen entirely inside Soviet borders. Both count by the same rule that protected Leopold: the Germans in Southwest Africa and the Ottoman leadership as internal affairs. Nobody ever tries to build a case against him. He doesn't flee. He doesn't hide. He keeps ruling, and within 10 years, his own country will be one of 4 powers deciding who else deserves a trial. That contradiction becomes real the day Nuremberg opens, on November 20th, 1945. This is the turning point. The first time anything actually changes. 24 defendants, 4 judges, 1 from each winning power. For the first time, a court charges individual men with crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, and argues that following orders is not an excuse. It is the biggest expansion of legal accountability in history built almost overnight because of what Allied soldiers had found in the camps. But the court's own bench proves it still isn't a clean, equal system. The Soviet judge is a man named Iona Nikitchenko. Before Nuremberg, Nikitchenko personally ran some of Stalin's show trials during the Great Purge, sentencing men like Lev Kamenev and Grigory Zinoviev to death on charges historians now know were faked. The very purge, just called Untouchable Internal Affairs, had placed its own judge on the panel, now deciding what a crime against humanity is. Nobody in the room mentions it. And thousands of miles away, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, carried out by one of the four prosecuting powers, are never investigated as a war crime by anyone, then or since. Nuremberg genuinely changed what the law could do. It did not change who the law was willing to point at. So the mechanism exists now. Does the outcome actually change with it? Not consistently. Mao Zedong's policies in China killed tens of millions through famine in the years after Nuremberg, and he dies as head of state in 1976, never investigated, because China was never conquered or occupied. Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge kills an estimated 1 to 2 million people in Cambodia in the 1970s, and he dies in 1998 in a jungle camp, after a hollow internal trial staged by his own former officers, before any real court can reach him. Idi Amin's regime kills as many as 300,000 people in Uganda, and when he is finally driven out in 1979, he simply flies to Saudi Arabia and lives there in comfort for 24 years, dying unpunished in 2003. There is one real exception. Charles Taylor, president of Liberia, is indicted in 2002 for arming a rebel group in Sierra Leone in exchange for diamonds, is eventually captured, and is convicted in 2012. The first former head of state an international court has convicted since Nuremberg itself. But it takes the total collapse of his own government to make that happen. And Slobodan Milosevic shows the opposite problem. Charged with genocide and war crimes across the Balkans, he dies in his cell in 2006, weeks before his trial would have ended, with no verdict ever reached. The law exists everywhere now. It still depends entirely on whether anyone with power is willing or able to use it. Picture that Nuremberg courtroom one more time. Before it existed, a king could kill 10 million people and be mourned as a monarch. Two empires could arrive at the exact same extermination method decades apart without ever comparing notes. A government could destroy its own people and watch the case dissolve into a hostage swap. A dictator could starve millions of his own citizens and still place his own judge on the very panel meant to define a crime against humanity. Vladimir Putin has held an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court since March 2023 for the unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children. He still travels freely because Russia never joined the court that issued it. Leopold died a king. Stalin died in his own bed in 1953. Mao died as head of state in 1976. The law changed completely in 1945. Whether the outcome changed with it is something history still hasn't settled. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments. If you want more history like this, it helps to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.